Welcome to Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go. This audio uses AI narration to present our original book analysis. Today we're going deep on Benjamin Franklin.
Okay.
Using Walter Isaacson's biography, Benjamin Franklin, An American Life. Everyone knows him as a founding father.
Right.
But there's so much more to his story.
Definitely.
Get ready to be surprised by his personality, his achievements,
It's pretty amazing.
and even some contradictions along the way.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
To really understand him, we need to go beyond the surface
I agree.
and look at the nuances Isaacson brings out. So let's start at the beginning with his family.
Okay. Sounds good.
Isaacson takes us back to Franklin's father, Josiah, a skilled craftsman who came to America from England in the late 1600s. Josiah was a Puritan, and his beliefs had a huge impact on young Benjamin.
In what way?
Well, Puritans emphasized hard work,
Right?
and they saw a connection between free thought and economic freedom. Those values really became foundational for Franklin. But what's interesting is how he adapted them, and sometimes even challenged them throughout his life.
How so?
He became more secular and rational in his thinking about morality. But he always kept that core belief in working hard and improving yourself.
I see.
Now, here's something that might surprise you.
What's that?
Franklin didn't go to Harvard.
Really?
A lot of people assume he did
I did too.
because of all his accomplishments. But his formal education was actually pretty limited. And Isaacson actually argues that this might have been a good thing.
You mean?
Yeah, it might have helped him to develop his independence and original thinking. Think about his early writing, like the Silence Do-Good essays.
Oh, yeah, I remember those.
He published those anonymously in his brother's newspaper. They were witty, and they challenged authority, which shows you that rebellious streak he had even then.
And his brother was a printer too, right?
Yes, his name was James. And Isaacson suggests that working for James had a big influence on Benjamin's worldview.
Like what?
It seems to have given him a deep dislike of arbitrary power. And that becomes a recurring theme throughout Franklin's life.
That makes sense.
All right, let's move on to his printing career,
Sure.
which actually had a pretty interesting start. Isaacson tells some funny stories about Franklin's first employer, Samuel Keimer.
Oh, what was he like?
Well, he was a bit of a character, kind of eccentric. Isaacson even recounts a story where the governor visited Keimer's shop and was really impressed by young Franklin.
What happened?
It actually left Keimer feeling pretty bad. Franklin even said that Keimer felt like a pig poisoned.
Wow, that's harsh.
But Franklin wasn't going to stay in Keimer's shadow forever. He was ambitious.
Yeah.
And he was smart.
So what did he do?
Well, he used his writing skills
Yeah.
to actually sabotage Keimer's newspaper.
Oh, wow.
And he generated a ton of publicity for a rival publication.
He knew how to make a splash.
He did. He even stirred up America's first abortion debate just to boost sales.
That's pretty wild.
It was. But it shows you how entrepreneurial he was and how he understood the power of the media. He wasn't afraid to push the boundaries
Yeah.
and use unconventional methods to get what he wanted.
And he was thinking about a better future in a personal way, too.
Oh, yeah.
Isaacson talks about how Franklin pursued something he called moral perfection.
Moral perfection.
He even came up with 13 virtues
Oh.
as a way to improve himself.
So it was like his own self-help system.
Exactly. Centuries before self-help was even a thing.
What were some of these virtues?
Well, there was temperance, order, resolution, cleanliness. All kinds of things.
And he really took it seriously, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. He tracked his progress every day.
Like with a chart or something.
Yeah, he held himself accountable.
But even Franklin had his weaknesses, right?
Of course, he was only human.
What did he struggle with?
He admitted that order was a tough one.
Oh, so he wasn't always so organized.
He actually called himself a bit of a slob.
That's kind of funny.
It makes him seem more relatable.
Right, like he wasn't some perfect superhuman.
Exactly. And he was self-aware, too.
What do you mean?
He knew that trying to be so virtuous could sometimes be a bit much.
So he didn't want to come across as too self-righteous.
Yeah, he worried about that. He even said he was afraid of being envied and hated.
If he became too perfect,
That's so Franklin, though, right?
that mix of practicality and humor.
It's what makes him so interesting.
Okay, so we've talked about his drive to improve himself. But what about his impact on society?
Well, that brings us to his Puritan roots.
You mean,
Even though he wasn't a strict Puritan anymore,
Right.
those values still shaped his outlook.
like frugality, hard work, service to the community?
Those were important to him.
And those ideas show up in his most famous work, don't they?
You're talking about Poor Richard's Almanac.
Yeah. It's not just a bunch of clever sayings.
No, Isaacson points out that Franklin used Poor Richard
as a way to spread his own ideas.
About economics, about society.
So he was kind of sneaky about it.
He was smart. He knew how to connect with people.
By using humor and everyday language.
Exactly. He was a master of communication.
And his scientific work was also amazing.
Absolutely.
We talked about his experiments with electricity. But he didn't stop there.
No, he was interested in everything.
Isaacson talks about his work on heat absorption, weather patterns, even oceanography.
He was a true polymath.
A what?
A polymath, someone who knows a lot about a lot of different things.
He was way ahead of his time.
And he always focused on practical applications.
There's that quote he's famous for.
Which one?
What signifies philosophy that does not apply to some use?
Yes. He wanted to make a difference.
He wanted to understand the world so he could make it better.
And that led to all his inventions.
The lighting rod, of course.
But there were others, too.
Yeah.
The Franklin stove, bifocal glasses, even a musical instrument called the harmonica.
The harmonica, I've never heard of that.
It was based on the idea of making music by rubbing wet fingers on glasses.
Really? That's wild.
Apparently it was quite popular in Europe.
Wow, you learn something new every day.
Especially when you're talking about Benjamin Franklin.
So we've seen how brilliant and innovative he was. But his life wasn't always easy. Isaacson talks about some of the challenges he faced.
Like the rift with his son William?
Oh, right. William remained loyal to the crown during the Revolution.
It must have been heartbreaking for Franklin.
To see his own son on the opposite side.
It shows you how complex the Revolution was.
It wasn't just a war for independence.
It divided families and communities. And Franklin's relationship with slavery was complex, too.
It's a tough subject.
Isaacson talks about how his views changed over time.
But it wasn't a simple evolution, was it?
No, it was a long process.
There were definitely some contradictions.
We have to remember the historical context, though.
Right. Slavery was just a part of life back then.
It was deeply ingrained in colonial society.
And Franklin owned slaves himself at one point.
He did early in his life.
But then he started to see things differently.
As he got older.
He recognized how unjust slavery was.
Both morally and economically.
And eventually, he became a strong advocate for abolition.
He joined the Pennsylvania Abolition Society. And he even wrote a petition to Congress.
Calling for the end of slavery.
It was a risky move.
He could have lost his reputation.
But he did it anyway.
Because he believed it was the right thing to do.
Exactly.
It's amazing how he kept trying to live up to his ideals.
Even as those ideals were changing.
Isaacson talks about how Franklin shifted his focus later in life.
He started looking for something he called densest happiness.
Densest happiness? What does that mean?
Well, Franklin was always a practical guy. Right. And he came to believe that true happiness...
It wasn't about fame or fortune?
It was about finding joy in everyday things.
So, simple pleasures.
Spending time with friends and family.
Reading, writing.
Tinkering with inventions.
Traveling.
All those things.
It sounds like he found a lot of contentment.
Even as he got older.
It's a good reminder for all of us, isn't it?
That happiness isn't about reaching some big goal.
It's about appreciating the little things.
And finding things that give you joy and make you think.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Benjamin Franklin's life, what are the key takeaways you hope listeners will remember?
Well, first, I hope they see just how much he accomplished.
He wasn't just a politician.
He was a scientist, a writer, a diplomat, an inventor.
A businessman.
A true Renaissance man.
And he was a master communicator.
He knew how to connect with people.
And get his ideas across.
And he never stopped trying to improve himself.
Or the world around him.
He was a champion of social change.
But it's important to remember he wasn't perfect.
Isaacson shows us that he was a complex person.
He had his flaws.
He made mistakes.
But he never stopped learning and growing.
And that's what makes him such an inspiring figure.
His legacy continues to this day.
He helped shape America.
Its values, its institutions.
Its spirit of innovation.
So if you want to learn more about this incredible man, I highly recommend reading Walter Isaacson's biography, Benjamin Franklin, and American Life.
It's a fantastic book.
It's a journey through history, science, politics, and personal growth.
All rolled into one.
And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more insightful book analyses.
You can also purchase the book through the link in the description.